Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robert Saul. I'm the Threat Detection and Incident Response Practice Manager. I look after the Customer Incident Response team here at AWS. It is so good to be with you all again. AWS Reinforce 2023 here in Anaheim. I want to introduce a close friend and colleague of mine. Jason, why don't you introduce yourself there?
You just said you were going to introduce me.
Well, I did introduce you a little bit.
So, hey,
you
everyone.
You can finish it.
Okay. Hey, Jason Hurst. I work on the customer incident response team under Robert, with Robert, around Robert.
Somewhere, yeah.
And I manage operations as well as our processes and technology throughput with our TPM and other team members on our team.
Yeah. So what we wanted to talk about today was the actual way that tickets are managed. Right? I mean, so this is our third episode. 2 episodes we've been talking about what customers, trying to give some customers advice and some guidance about staying away from tickets, right? Staying away from incidents. What we really wanted to talk about today is some of your insights as the operations boss about, guidance about customers and managing tickets and managing those incidents. What they should have in place, what's going to help them, right, with their own mechanisms for incident management. So with that said, what is your top 3 or 4 things, piece of advice, guidance for customers as they're thinking about building their ticketing mechanisms, their alerting mechanisms? What are your thoughts?
So the first rule of Fight Club is not to talk about Fight Club. But because we're here at Reinforce today.
We are, yes.
So the biggest thing is starting off, have a strategy. It's really cool to build things. We have Amazonians, we have customers, we have partners, we have a whole bunch of people that are doing really incredible things and building some really cool things. But when it comes to ticket management and quality control, if you just kind of ad hoc it, then what you're going to do is actually get overwhelmed by the data.
Right.
For an example of VPC flow, okay, cool. I have a single flow, single VPC, a couple of EC2 instances.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, I'm using containers, and now I have NAT gateways, I have load balancers, I have API gateways, I have WAF, I have a few thousand EC2 instances.
And growing every day.
Exactly.
Right.
And when you look at that, that volume, you're like, all right, where's the bad thing? And
Right.
It's like, okay, we can open up a ticket and say there's a bad thing, but what exactly are you looking for? Because you need to be able to identify what the bad thing is and then have a very repeatable process to walk through that, so that way anyone on the team could follow the mechanism and be able to engage that. For example, if you and I are at Anaheim, California.
Away from computers and everything else, right.
Exactly. There's no computer right now, so I want to make sure that the rest of the team, if something does happen, then we have that survivability across the team.
Connect that back to what we're talking about, trying to get the customers to start thinking about operationalizing their incident response. So that, the way we typically call this is just, workload creep, right? I mean, it's getting bigger, it's getting bigger, it's getting bigger. Connect it back to their ticket management system, the way that they detect and then alert for people to do things.
So even better, now we're starting to get into metrics a little bit.
Yes.
Where you identify based on your business use case and your actual operational payloads and data, all right, these are the things that are important. What is my mean time to recover?
Right.
How long can this thing be offline before we start losing customers, start losing revenue? Alternatively, customer trust is a huge thing for Amazon and other customers as well.
Yeah.
For example, yesterday, there was a hiccup that occurred that was very public, and Amazon was very, very transparent with that with our customers. Hey, it was a hiccup. It wasn't a security event. It wasn't anything special. But now that it happened, we've done things to prevent it from happening again. And based on our ticketing mechanism, having that repeatable process with so many people here in Anaheim, California, it has to be survivable. And it can't be people-based.
So I think what you're saying is that when customers are evaluating their ticket management processes, some way, somehow, an alert goes out, someone sees it and does something, right? Someone's going to send a ticket or some sort of notification. All of that stuff should be transparent so that other team members can see it, can act on it, and everything else, not just one single person, right?
Exactly. We could talk about least privilege, IAM policies, all that good stuff too. too. But having a controlled workflow, so that way you have that go through teams, and then having your escalation procedures. If it gets stopped.
That's what I want to talk, is the escalation. Yeah.
Yeah, if your ticket gets stopped for any reason, how do you get over that roadblock? Do you just kind of sit and wait for a week and hope it goes away? Or in Amazon, we have something called an andon cord, where any Amazonian can go ahead and pull that cord, and leadership is very aware when that occurs.
Right.
But again, you have to have a way to get past those blockers if there's something critical going on, because otherwise you're harming the customer and potentially harming yourself.
Your own workloads,
Yeah, because...
Yeah, well, I just wanted to, so there's our mechanisms at AWS, and especially on the CIRT team, are very specific, right? And they're very good. We're able to move very quickly.
If you do say so yourself.
If I do say so myself. We're able to escalate tickets, and we're able to move them to get to the right people as we need to get. It's how do we think about asking smaller customers to do that? They may not have the planning resources and everything else. Is that how would you say that customers should approach that?
Well, the biggest thing is working backwards from what are your goals?
Yeah.
What are your business objectives and goals? If the goal is to have a web server for e-commerce available $699.9999, then okay, that is the standard. And now what are the detection requirements? Well, I have to be able to detect it within 1 nanosecond of an event occurring. In order to do that, I need some form of logging to query against. On top of that, I need some kind of automation for messaging. In Amazon, whether that's SES, SMS, SNS, insert other thing here with Pinpoint, setting up that dynamic messaging that says, hey, you told the computer to look for the thing. The computer found the thing.
Found the thing, yeah.
Exactly.
Now what?
So now... what are you going to do about the thing?
Right. And who are you going to tell?
Exactly.
Right. So I think we were talking earlier today on one of our episodes, and we were I kept on going back to the strategy. I kept on going back to this larger strategy and thinking it through, right? Like giving the customer some thoughts about how to start thinking about this. Isn't it great that all of this stuff is connected in that one strategy? Right. What are your business requirements? What are your logging requirements? What are your response requirements? What are your ticketing requirements? That can be a big pill to swallow all at once.
Well,
so what guidance would you give customers to chop that up? Like where do they start? Because this can be intimidating.
Well, the other part of it is if you're a smaller customer or a less mature customer on your cloud security journey, don't try to eat everything at once.
Yes.
It's not going to end well. If you turn on VPC Flow on all of your development systems and your developers are working, creating, terminating, all of a sudden you have millions of events that are suspicious, but in reality it's just developer activities. So your false positives go through the roof. The other thing to consider...
Well, but then you've got all those false positives that now you have to ticket and investigate to make sure that it wasn't anything actual.
The other thing to consider is if you're a smaller customer, there isn't a need to separate your operational incidents and your security incidents.
Oh, talk about that one. That's hollowed ground a little bit. So walk that through.
So if you walk through that, it's all based on what you're looking at. For example, if you have an EC2 instance that's deleted, that could be an operational event. Hey, my website is down. And it could have been a misconfiguration with the auto-scaling group. It could have been a bad Terraform template. It could have been new SSH keys were pushed to it that weren't supposed to be used, various things. Or I have an exposed credential for whatever reason, and an unauthorized entity is now interacting with my EC2 instance and terminates it. At the end of the day, when you look at CloudTrail, it's still a terminate instances API call. So if you're trying to focus, all right, here's my security pipeline, and here's my operational pipeline, and you divide that across the board, you're siloing your individuals, and also you're not using as much capability as you have available. That you could train, mentor, guide your security folks on operational events, train, mentor, guide your operational folks on security events, so that way you can get that cross-team collaboration and that cross-team response as fast as possible.
Okay. So you just said a lot of really cool stuff.
I know.
Boy, as you always do, boil it down to the, because I think who you're talking to is the smaller, like you said earlier, the less mature, the customers that are starting their cloud journey. Boil that down to a couple of bite-sized chunks. How should customers be thinking about this, kind of beginning to end, to get them to start logging and ticketing and taking actions on their incidents? Just really short and concise.
Yeah, so the first thing I like to do, we're not compliance. This isn't a compliance talk.
Thank you.
I love y'all. But
we love our compliance brethren. Yes.
I like the NIST 853 incident response framework, where you have your preparation, detection and analysis, containment, recovery, and lessons learned. And then you loop through those. So if you plan against a framework, it could be GLBP, it could be CCPA, it could be PCI DSS, it could be HIPAA, it could be, make up another acronym here that sounds really smart. Anyway about it, as long as you're kind of working backwards from your regulatory requirements, then
which should be in their strategy.
Exactly. Yeah. That is like the best thing you can do, because regulations have potential financial fees associated with them if you're not compliant. So that's a huge thing, regardless if it's irregardless, because I like the word. If it's a operational event or a security event. It's still going to show in the API logs, and you're still going to have to respond it in some fashion. Okay. It's just a matter at the end of the day, are you just trying to restore, or are you also trying to contain and eradicate some unauthorized user activity in order to then restore to a known good state? Okay. But otherwise, you can still follow the framework from the front to back and identify, like you said, strategy. What is your strategy? What are your regulatory frameworks? What is your paperwork? I know. Playbooks, runbooks, we say it a billion times. Everyone, we're like, please make them. Please.
Well, and I'm feeling kind of bad now because we open sourced our playbooks. I mean, what are we up to? 17, 18 open source playbooks right now?
Sure.
Yeah, so, something like that. Gosh, I wish we had the link right now. But they're super important. All right, so let's wrap this up, because I want to get on to escalations real quick. This is what I heard you say. Sit back and think it through. Right? Identify those important parts of your business. Overlay it onto NIST. Build a plan.
Exactly.
That's the bite-sized chunk.
And then, if a security service, Amazon or otherwise, meets a business requirement, then there you go. Here's kind of puzzle pieces.
Turn it on. Listen to it.
Exactly.
Do what it tells you.
It's just working backwards from your requirements, because otherwise, if you start building an incident response plan based on emotional responses. It's not going to go well.
Doesn't end well.
Especially if you're in the middle of a security event and somebody's in your environment doing things they're not supposed to. The last thing you want to do at that point is figure out how are you going to communicate with legal and PR.
Oh, so this comes from firsthand experience from some of the tickets that we've worked together. I call the number that the lawyers are supposed to be at, and it's the wrong number. How do we reach out to all these different entities? All right, a few minutes left. Let's talk about escalations.
Nah.
Let's please. This is really important, right? All right. So what we're talking about in Amazon, this is an escalation culture, right? So what that means is that if you get blocked, trying to work through some of these work streams, we escalate. We escalate. We raise it up to the next layer of leadership to get guidance and assistance. Right. With customers, I mean, we see frequently we don't know how to contact X. We don't feel comfortable contacting X because of someone potentially being mad.
Yeah.
Talk to it's an interesting connection between the people and the technology about reaching out to those senior leaders. Talk to me about that from an ops perspective.
Well, something that's relatively simple is your alternate security contacts for your account. As part of creating your account, whether you're doing it for organizations, landing zones, manually, whatever. An account is an account until it isn't. Identifying who your alternate security contacts are, so that way when you reach out for help, or Amazon tells you, hey, by the way, customer, we found a thing that's interesting.
You should do something.
We kind of recommend you look at it. You don't have to, but we really, really, really think you should look at it. So having your alternate security contacts is a huge first step.
Well, and testing it.
Yes. Testing, simulate and iterate.
Yeah. Make sure that they know they're the alternate security context. But then the organization also has to empower them to make these decisions.
Yep.
Right?
Because you have to have a decision maker.
Yeah.
If you just have in IT tech, okay, that's our on-call for our tier 1 support desk. Cool.
Yeah.
What are they allowed to do? Report?
Yeah.
Oh, so they can't delete these, who knows, for example, P3 type instances.
Or keys made by threat actors.
Or keys,
Or
yeah.
something like that.
So you're telling me they can't clean up or modify anything. All they can do is read, list, describe calls.
Right.
Exactly. Oh. Okay.
So give me some examples. I mean, I know I've got my own of when we've been working through instance with customers. Give me an example of a decision that needed to be made that couldn't be made then because they didn't have the right people.
You kind of brought it up. Deleting access keys.
Yeah.
Because an access key could be hard-coded into an application, or it could be referenced as part of a production payload.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And if you remove that key without
revenue
doing another key, you break the operational process. So basically, the customer's pipeline is still operational. It's just being dual-purposed or used by an unauthorized user.
Right.
In order to remove the unauthorized user, you have to break the production payload, and that's a really hard pill to swallow.
Why?
Identifying that, okay, this actor is using this credential, but so are my services.
Yeah.
So in order to remove one, I have to remove both.
I love the interconnectivity once again between the people and the technology, right? Because on our episode earlier, we were talking about don't use static keys. I said it like 4 or 5 times. Don't use static keys, because if you do use a static key and something bad happens, you get into this position where customers are, where you're going to have to decide to turn down that workload that you're making money on in order to fix it, and that's just not good. And I love that intersection of where those people have to be empowered to make those decisions.
Exactly, but it also goes back to operational versus security event.
Yeah.
You're now, potentially to resolve a security event, you're going to cause an operational event.
Yeah.
So that's why the responses are very, very intertwined, because as a security engineer or security consultant, whatever I am today, need to make sure the customer understands, okay, if I click this button, this is the downstream impact.
Right.
Is that acceptable by leadership in the company, whether that's the CISO, CTO, CFO, whether it's your partner branch, who cares?
So let's talk about those smaller customers that may not have that infrastructure. And I really want to get down to like prescriptive guidance for all the customers. And I think it gets back to know who the escalation procedures go to. Make sure that everyone knows that they should be able to get reached out to at any time. Right, because incidents don't always wait for working hours, and that they're empowered to make these decisions, and then any of those decisions that we think need more scrutiny can be done by this person at the same time as they need.
Yep. The other piece of that, though, is to test that plan. Because if you wait until a security or an operational event to test the plan,
fails 100% of the time.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Bob used to be in marketing, but because of separation of duties and rotating roles for least privilege, Bob now works over in IT.
We've seen this before, and it's really tough to work through. Lots of people to communicate with.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, so we talked a little bit about the mechanisms. We talked a little bit about alerting. We've got about a minute left. You get 30 seconds for this is what you think, sum it all up for customers. What do they need to hear, and what do they need to do? Quickly.
The big things you need to do is test your production payloads from a security aspect.
Yeah.
Whether you're using fault injection simulator, whether you're using an external code repo, whether you're using one of our partners, such as Tenable, who's actually in the back today, Wiz.io. It doesn't matter how you do it. It's evaluate your workloads from operational and a security aspect, and then have documented plans that are pre-approved in order to execute.
And pre-thought out.
Exactly. Because, like I said, there's nothing worse than trying to do instant response based on emotion. And
And off the fly.
Yeah.
Just trying to make it up, and it's really hard on the folks. It's really hard on the org as they try to stomach all that.
Yeah, as we like to say, it's like herding cats.
Something like that. All right, this has been great. Thanks.
No.
This has been fun. Yeah.
Has it?
Everyone, my name is Robert Stahl. I am the Threat Detection and Incident Response Practice Manager for AWS. Reinforce 2023. We'll see you all again soon. Thank you.